Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, Donald Trump has held his inaugural Liberation Day of tariffs. I wonder how many feel liberated. He insisted that American workers were loving it, which is odd given that they didn't know what his plan was before he announced it. Investors, however, do not seem to be loving it. I'm not sure how much the ordinary MAGA faithful will love it either, once they see what it means, not only with the cost of basics massively increasing, but Trump has even ended up slapping huge tariffs on his own merchandise. Those MAGA hats are made in China, you know. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So there are essentially like two main things I want to discuss today. My thoughts about the tariffs in general and Trump's various justifications for them and the specific impact on the UK. But because it was turned into an absolute monster, I'm going to split it into two. Actually, this is still going to be quite long, but at least not an entire Netflix series. So much self-defeating stupid to discuss in so little time. So I'll go over the UK impact later today, although I'll just say for now, definitely justification for Labour's approach for now at least. But the tariffs themselves. First of all, he held up some boards as props where he had what appeared to be tariffs on them. It was supposed to be the tariffs that other countries levy on the US imports, and then the tariffs he was going to levy back to balance things out. Only it was a fabrication. Tariffs are generally very low around the world. For example, the board claimed that New Zealand levies 20% tariffs on US imports, but they made the point, no, the average is like 1.9%, with zero tariffs on quite a lot of products. And the same is true of countries all over the world. The tariffs on Trump's board were way, way higher than the actual tariffs which countries levy. So what's going on? Well, Trump claimed the figure was a combination of tariffs as well as like what he called currency manipulation, whatever that is, and other devices. He didn't explain what he meant by those, however. So effectively, it was supposed to be like a crude measure of what he thought the imbalance in trade was. An economist puzzling over the figures, as from reports I could read, couldn't actually work out how he'd arrived at the specific numbers. So essentially, the numbers have been fabricated. And that's important. Journalists were reporting what some Americans thought of the move. Of the supportive ones, not everyone's supportive, of the supportive ones, some think it means, oh, the other countries just have to lower their tariffs and we'll lower ours and it'll all be fine. But the tariffs are already low for the vast majority of countries on the vast majority of products. They're sometimes zero. How do you get lower than zero? The numbers on the board are lies. So all the countries can either do is nothing, which most countries are going to do because it's not worth stoking their own inflation, and maybe look at making it easier for their own businesses to trade with more stable markets, or raise the tariffs as like, you know, the likes of the EU and China are going to do. Trump deliberately held his speech late in the day so that the stock markets wouldn't crash as he was speaking. But after hours trading still showed what was going to happen when the markets opened up the next day. And it's an ill wind which blows no good. Markets are sliding everywhere as they're opening. And if you're thinking that there will be a sudden backlash against Trump once the impacts of this policy hit, I'm not so sure. Americans interviewed were saying that they understood that things would get bad for a bit, but then after a year or two, countries would play ball and things would be made better. In other words, people think it's like short-term pain for long-term gain, right? So because they don't recognise that Trump is lying to them, they're going along with his logic. So it could be some time before a critical mass of Americans decides that enough time has passed and it's not working. As for that speech, which I'm not going to pick everything apart, but what an idiot. He said there will be no tariffs on companies who build in the USA. I'm thinking, okay. Does that mean that companies with factories in the USA producing those products in the USA, does that mean they'll be able to import the components and materials they need tariff-free? No, that's not what he meant. Apparently, what he just means is, if you don't import, you won't pay import taxes. Thanks for that. No shit, Sherlock. Trump described his move as one of the most important days in American history. I might actually agree on that point. The only vaguely believable thing he said during the entire bout of verbal diarrhea. Trump has given several reasons for these tariffs. None of them make any sense. One justification is it will act as a balance against import taxes on American goods elsewhere. But when he says import taxes, he mostly means sales taxes, and America has those as well. Also, the value of his tariffs don't tally up with even the sales taxes of his target markets, no matter what his play school board said. And even if his actions were aligned with his justification, it still doesn't work. Every time Trump raises tariffs above agreed trade deal or World Trade Organization levels, he invites counter tariffs from anyone who feels up for the fight. And the ones who feel up for the fight are the ones upon whom America is most dependent on trade. That's their top export markets. Another justification is to ease back on income tax. Trump thinks he can largely, possibly even completely, replace income tax with import tax. In his speech, he described how foreign countries used to pay US taxes. And then in 1913, income tax was levied on US citizens for, and he said, reasons unknown to mankind. He wants to go back to the 19th century. But, you know, I mean, the thing is, foreign countries don't pay the import tariffs anyway. The importing market does. But with today's economies, like, it's completely impossible. He'd have to have tariffs going up into the triple figures. And that would be just to make, you know, the imports are just too expensive. If America doesn't import, there'll be no import tariffs at all. Because when you raise tariffs, so you end up reducing your imports because some of them just become too expensive. It's not worth it, right? So then you reduce the import taxes you're collecting because you're not importing as much. So then you have to raise them, which hits more imports. You end up with this ridiculous cycle until all you're left with imports are goods which only the super wealthy can afford and who are prepared to pay 3 times as much for these luxury items. A third justification is to bring jobs back to America. Now, this thinking is based on the idea that if it becomes too expensive to import into America, the companies producing those products will set up production in the United States, creating jobs. But it also contradicts the second justification, because either these tariffs will reduce imports, which then forces more production to take place in America, or they will raise revenues to replace income tax. You can't do both. Now, some companies will, yes, absolutely move production to the USA. Of course they do. If you're producing something and you sell a lot of it in the USA and the tariffs are really high, you are going to build a factory in the USA, right? But they're only going to do that for their American market. It's too risky to try to produce in America and sell in other markets as well, where retaliatory tariffs could be levied. But the reverse will also happen. When the likes of the EU and China raise retaliatory tariffs, American companies may be forced to relocate some of their production, not necessarily into those markets, but at least away from America. In fact, you watch Elon Musk invest in factories either in China or countries with a decent trade relationship with China. This is what happened during Trump's first term. You know, it was much less severe then, but he started a bit of a trade war, and his tariffs did create some extra jobs in America. But for every job he created, he lost 5 more. And that's not hyperbole, that is actually the ratio. The net impact was a severe loss of jobs from the American economy. And this is because it's a strategy based on selling to yourself. But countries don't get rich only by selling to their own people. You need to export as well, and American exports are going to get hit. In addition, other markets are going to band together, meaning supply chains will reorder themselves to leave America out where possible. I mean, and this could also be stoked in some markets by consumers voluntarily boycotting some American products. I mean, we saw this happening with Brexit. Goods used to flow between Britain and, say, the Netherlands and France across Britain as a sort of bridge. Not anymore. And many British products around Europe have been, over the last few years, replaced by goods produced within the single market because those suppliers are more reliable. Now, in Britain, we're increasingly cut out of supply and transport chains. Also, we lose out when there are shortages. For example, frequently shortages of certain medicines. When this happens, the EU, we get 80% of our stuff affected from the EU, supplies its own members first, meaning Britain goes without at these times, and we are going without with quite a lot of very crucial medicines right now. The same happens with some foods from time to time. The same will happen to America. Not out of spite, it's not spite, it's just because the USA is going to become an awkward customer to supply. So they will be bottom of the list of priority for dispatchers. So all right, let's get rid of this American order. Oh, we've run out of stuff, can't send them anything. That's how it works. It's how it's working with Britain right now. A fourth justification actually came from Vance a few weeks ago, though presumably it's of Trump origin as well, that they saw globalization as a hierarchy where the rich countries would produce higher value products and poorer countries made lower value, simpler products, right? They saw it as a way of embedding an established order which took no account of innovation or ambition. which is ultimately the way Conservatives tend to think. Everything for them is about conserving the order which put them at the top of the tree. That's why they're called Conservatives. But anyway, this did not occur. China, India especially rose up, which is why so many of Trump's people are very hawkish, particularly about China. It's not out of solidarity with Taiwan, whom they may well abandon in a heartbeat, but because China had the nerve to develop an industrial strategy. This is what Trump calls America being taken advantage of, that other countries might challenge them. So another reason for these tariffs is to quite deliberately smash global supply chains. However, what it will do is reorder them. It's a sort of anti-Brexit feeling in some ways. Brexiteers thought that if the UK left the EU, or some Brexiteers thought, if the UK left the EU and then just opened up its trade equally to everyone, it could be a shining beacon to the world and everyone would go, oh, this is marvellous, we'll all do the same thing. Their wet dream of completely free trade with no product standards would be realised. This was literally how Jacob Rees-Mogg justified it. Only there was a small flaw in the plan. In the words of Blackadder, it was bollocks. Everyone else just carried on doing their own thing, and Britain found itself unable to manage the trade border, so we now give the EU easier access into our own market than we give into theirs. Trump is trying the opposite. By being the excessively protectionist, he hopes to inspire the rest of the world to do likewise, shut off their own markets to the global economy, and then America wins by default because they are already the largest economy. Only it won't work, just as with Brexit. Other countries will just reorder their supply chains along the paths of least resistance, as businesses already do. It will be painful while it happens, and it will take years. No doubt about that. But if the USA persists, in a few years' time, America will find it has permanently lost trade, just like Britain did. That America is a huge economy does not mean it can avoid the trade gravity which brought Brexit Britain down with a bump. It just means these seismic shocks will be greater. Trump says that American manufacturers have fallen behind, but his solution is apparently not to boost production with investment and research to make better stuff, because that's what people keep saying. If you want to sell more to the world, make stuff that the world wants to buy, not this shit you keep producing. In fact, he and Musk are actually slashing research and development funding, aren't they? I mean, how does that make sense? If you want to compete on the world stage, you need to research and develop. He thinks that protectionism will magically make America produce more stuff. That what? Who's going to buy it? But if only other Americans buy it, how does that put the USA on a stronger footing? All Trump's Liberation Day is liberating Americans from is the hassle of having to choose what to buy, because they won't be able to afford anything. And what they can afford, they won't have much choice. Their money will not stretch as far, there will be shortages. Take it from someone who lives in a country that tried to go it alone on trade. Actually, on that score, it's not escaped people's attention that Brexit was supposed to open the way for a close trade deal with the USA. A trade deal that could not possibly make up for the damage to our European trade, but still. So all those people who voted for Trump, and especially the ones who bought his ratty hat, if he doesn't go back down fairly quickly, they're going to see the cost of everything go up. They're going to see jobs being lost. They're going to see shortages of some things. The US government were recently begging the EU to send them eggs to cope with their own avian flu-related shortages. The EU have the option of doing what Canada threatened, not only retaliatory tariffs, but maybe export taxes. Oh, you want our eggs? Sure, you could pay twice as much. Maybe even export blocks if necessary. And even those ratty MAGA hats are going to get more expensive. Trump's merch is made in China, and he's just slapped a baseline 34% tariff on Chinese goods. Still, at least all those MAGA nuts can console themselves with the fact that the Liberals in America are suffering as well. That's how the Brexit gammons cope with their Brexit-fueled poverty in Britain. Doesn't matter that they didn't get what they were promised. Doesn't matter that their life's no better, as long as their own countrymen and women are suffering as well. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.